They were starting the fourth parak. We just started the Mishnah yesterday. You know, you read this parak, you learn this, you can appreciate what's going on in Israel today. You know, with the conversions and with the legitimacy, and why the Rabbanut is so adamant in not giving up the control over marriage and divorce. Because today it's a major battle in Israel. They wanted to take it away from them, and every rabbi, whether it's conservative reform, he has a right to do his own conversions, his own divorce, his own marriage. And as a result of that, the legitimacy of every Jew comes into question. What are they? Are they kosher Jews, not kosher Jews? And Ezra, before he left Bavel, we spent 7 years there. Things weren't easy. And they didn't have control. But before, when they came back, he had control, he had power, and he understood that unless you have people in position who actually could take control, it's worse than the Wild West. So before he left Bavel, every classification of illegitimacy, he took with him from Bavel. And he came to Eretz Yisrael with it. Because he realized since all the Chachamim had ascended from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, if you leave any with their issues back there, who's going to deal with the issues? There's nobody to deal with the issues. What's the little story? You know, after the war, there were many issues of aguna. You know, husbands, did they perish in the Holocaust? They did not perish in the Holocaust. And it was very, very difficult. And, you know, Rav Herzog, he was the chief rabbi of Israel. And as much of a Talmud Chacham he was, you know, he had all the survivors that came to Israel, and many women wasn't civil that they could remarry because it had to be confirmed or sufficiently confirmed that the husbands died, that they're widows. So what do you do? And he really was beside himself. He didn't know what to do. So it was known, you know, Rebbe Yoshev, Zechat Tzaddik Livrocha, who was the Posek Gador, all his life, even as a child, into adulthood, and even if he was married, he always studied himself. Rebbe Yoshev was the son-in-law of Rabbi Ari Levin. Rabbi Ari Levin was known as the Tzaddik Yerushalayim. So Ari Levin understood who his son-in-law was. But Rebbe Yoshev always learned himself. They don't learn with Chavrusa. When he was young, he learned with his grandfather. His grandfather was a famous Mekubal. It's known as the Leshem, which the Chofetz Chaim had said on the Leshem. The Chofetz Chaim said on the Leshem, he was a Kabbalist, he was Ashkenazic, he wasn't a Sephardi. The Leshem, that anybody who has an opportunity to engage with a Leshem in this world, he should. Of course, in the world to come, he's going to be so great, nobody's going to be able to approach him. So therefore, now's the time. If you can have any level of connection with him, communication, now's the time. That was Rabbi Yoshev, until his grandfather passed away, he studied with his grandfather, the Leshem, because they came to Eretz Yisrael. He was, I think, 11 years old when he came from Europe with his grandfather and his parents, and he was a child. He was born after 20 years, 25 years. His parents didn't have children, and he was born as a result of a bracha that his grandfather had given his daughter. That's how he was born. The name Elyashiv was not his father's name. His father assumed the name of his father-in-law. The family name was not Elyashiv. Okay, just don't. So what happened? And he always saw Rabbi Levin had gone to a certain kol and said, "Do me a favor. Admit my son-in-law into the kol." Nobody knew. Rabbi Levin, being who he was, they'll do him a favor. So he was admitted. He was accepted in this kol, and he studied himself. So they thought, you know, he's a man, average intelligence. He's, you know, applies himself. So after the war, but they had very serious Talmidei Chacham in this kol, and Rabbi Yosef was off to the side. You know, he didn't rate whatsoever. After the war, Rabbi Herzog comes to this kol with all his issues, and he wants to start discussing with these very advanced Talmidei Chacham. They're not able to deal with it. It's beyond their capacity. He goes up to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Herzog, and within moments, he opens up all the issues, and within moments, he explains, he shows Rav Herzog how to deal with all the issues. And Rav Herzog, every day for months, would come to the kollel, spend hours every day resolving all the agun issues. And it was through Rebbe Yoshev literally hundreds of women were able to remarry because of the rules of Rebbe Yosef. This is this is in 45, 46, 47. This is what happened. This is when he became known. Until then, they thought he was an ordinary person. He sat, he was diligent, this and that. They had no idea who he was. Okay? Then it was recorded. Then it was recorded. I mean, well, with the basis. So what happened? Okay, that was that. So after the war, there was an incident, famous story where Moshe Feinstein. What was the story? There was a woman who came. So after the war, in the DP camps, there were people who were survivors, who were also great Talmidei Chacham, pre-World War II Gedolim, and some of them survived. And there was a certain woman who survived the camp. She came to the United States, and before she married, she claimed that a certain posek in the camp gave her a ruling that she's permitted to remarry. Famous posek. In the 60s, her husband returns from Rio de Janeiro. This woman, her husband, he's alive. So she was Orthodox. First, well, her children are mamzerim. They're illegitimate. She's a married woman. She believed without a question. So, and she received a psak. So she comes to Rav Moshe. Is there any way to work it out that her children are legitimate? Any way? So Rav Moshe was a very gentle, humble. The word gentle is an understatement for what he was. And he asked her, could you please tell me who gave you the heter? Who gave you the release that you're permitted to remarry? So he said, he mentioned the person's name. So Moshe heard the name. He became enraged. And he says to her, you're a liar, you're an adulteress, you never had a right to marry. The man, this person never gave you that ruling. And he said it with such force, she broke down crying and admitted that she lied. She figured, she wanted to remarry. She had no heter, but she figured her only release from her previous state was to say was based on him. So Moshe said, asked him, how did you know that it was not possible? How did you know with such certainty that she lied? He says, because this person was such a tzaddik, and he had such responsibility for halacha in Europe before the war, Hashem would never allow such a tragedy should come through him. That's how I knew she was lying. It was impossible that it's possible that man could have been such a psak, which ultimately this tragedy, this halachic tragedy, should have come about.
You mean that he was not returned in the DP camp?
No, he was there, but he never gave her the release. He never gave a ruling that she's permitted to remarry. She made up a story. But he says, because it's not possible that a man of that dimension of spirituality, of holiness, that Hashem would allow such tragedy should come through him. So mamzerim. She had to leave her husband. That was the end of the story. She wasn't permitted to either husband. She was considered an adulteress. She left. Why don't you ask your brother? We'll give you the psak on it. Okay. I'm not saying no. I'm just telling this was a story unrelated to him, but that was it. Okay, I'm not here for stories. So I'm only talking what relates to the Mishnah. So I'm saying, unless you have people of caliber, of capability, you leave it to ordinary people to adjudicate this kind of these kinds of issues. It's disastrous. Disastrous. Ezra understood that all the Gedolim left Bavel to come to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore he forced there's a discussion, Machlos Abai and Rava, did he force the various groupings to come, or they agreed to go by themselves? To leave Bavel to come to Eretz Yisrael, we'll see the argument in the Gemara. Why they would come themselves, or they had to be forced to come. Mamzerim, all the illegitimate Jews. Of course, if you leave the illegitimate Jews, nobody's to oversee the communities. They can intermarry with kosher Jews, and who's going to stop it? Nobody's going to stop it. So therefore, Ezra understood the only way that you're able to maintain the purity of the Jews left in Bavel, without people, responsible people there, you have to take them with you. And in Eretz Yisrael, you have the Sanhedrin, you have people who are qualified to deal with all the issues. In Bavel, you don't have those kinds of people anymore. It's interesting. There's a Mishnah, people have a practical question. There's a Mishnah at the beginning of Gittin says that a person who brings a get, Dinas Hayam, brings a get from overseas, so yes, agent who delivers the get has to say that the get was written before him and was signed before him. The agent who delivers the get. Why? Because the Gemara says that the Torah says when you write a get, it has to be written lishma. It has to be written for the sake. It has to be written through the instruction of the husband, the directive of the husband, and it has to be written specifically for him and for his wife. And if you have two people with identical names, all the information is identical, it's written for one couple, it's not valid for the other couple. Yeah, the Gemara Mishnah says if you have a man who has two wives with the same names, an older wife and a younger wife, initially he was going to divorce one wife, and then he chooses to use that get to divorce the other wife, although the information is identical, it's not valid because the get has been written specifically for the husband and that particular wife who's divorcing. There's Torah law, there's not rabbinic laws. So now, if you bring a get from Eretz Yisrael, the shliach does not have to say b'fonei nechtam. Doesn't have to say it was written before me. He doesn't have to attest to that, and it was signed before me. If you bring it from overseas, it has to. Why? Because we say because lo b'ki b'shma. Because in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, since they didn't have batei dinim, they didn't have rabbinic courts, so the sofrim were not really fully proficient in all the laws. So Sofa may have written it without writing lishma. So therefore you needed either witnesses or the Gemara says the shliach was sufficient. He had to attest to the fact it was written before him, it was signed before him, it was written correctly. Otherwise the get cannot be used. That's funny nechta. So Gemara says, what about maybe get me Bavel? What about if you bring a get from Bavel? So Gemara says, Bavel is like Eretz Yisrael. Why is Bavel like Eretz Yisrael? So the Gemara says, because when Rav originally was a Yerushalmi. Rav studied under Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. Rav was a nephew of Reb Chia. Reb Chia was one of the closest students of Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. And Rav was Reb Chia's nephew. And Rav was greater than Rabbi Yochanan. We have the Gemara in Chulin. Rav left Eretz Yisrael, went to Bavel. When Rav went to Bavel, he established yeshivas in Bavel. Before Rav went to Bavel, there wasn't any Torah in Bavel. It was desolate. When Rav went to Bavel, he established Bavel. Bavel was the equivalent of Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says after Rav went to Bavel, Eretz Yisrael would give him. Now Bavel, if you bring a get from Bavel, once Rav went there, now one doesn't have to say b'fonei nechtam. Bavel is not bringing a get from overseas, so although it's not Eretz Yisrael. Because Bavel now assumes that new level, because now we have Talmud Chachamim. But when Ezra left Bavel, what was left behind, it was the equivalent of what Rav came to before he came to Bavel. People didn't know very much. Okay. Just the background. You got it.
Well, we learned that Ezra was very careful in Bavel with 10 groupings, organized 10 groupings.
No, we classified. There were 7 groupings of pedigree. Pedigree, that's what the Mishnah is going to speak about. You have Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, Mamzerim, converts, 10 groupings of people, and he took all these groupings, took them to Eretz Yisrael.
Right. But how do you, when he came to decided that they knew
No. They were super. No. That the Gemara will discuss it. Because they were batei dinim. You had rabbinic courts in every community. Any member of the community was evaluated. You couldn't do what you wanted over there. It was the communities were supervised. Marriage was under the jurisdiction of the courts. You couldn't just do anything you wanted over there. I remember I once went to one of the people who was married in Eretz Yisrael, and it was in the community right outside of Rehovot. And the person wanted I should officiate. According to the law in Israel, this story goes back 20 years ago, unless you're a member of the Rabbanut, a person officiates, you could be arrested. So he wanted I should officiate, so he had to get special permission from the Rabbanut that I was qualified according to their standards to officiate. Otherwise, legally, I was not permitted to officiate. And that's the level of control, this 20 years ago, that Rabbanut had over this area of marriage. Because they wanted, because it's a sacred area. Because if you actually compromise in this area, you could have terrible things coming out of this. Okay? Today, they're fighting over it. It's not simple. They're sold today. How many organizations do you have for kashrus in America? Okay. Asari Yuchsin Olu Mi Bavel. There were 10 classifications of pedigree. which ascended from Bavel. Ascended. Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, ordinary Jews. Chaloli. These are Kohanim who married women who were not permitted to them. So that means the children are Chaloli. The daughters are not permitted to marry Kohanim. Geri, v'charuri, converts. Charuri means a person who was originally a Canaanite slave or Canaanite slave woman, and they were emancipated. They're also, that's considered a convert. Mamzeri, Nesini, person comes from the nation called the Nesinim. These are like the Givonim. The Givonim seem the same. They're originally from the 7 tribes of Canaan who converted, so they're illegitimate. Shtuki. What's Shtuki? A woman's pregnant. The Mishnah will explain it. And we don't know who impregnated her. Whether it was a goy, we're not sure. Whether it was an incestual relation, we're not sure. So the child is born, he knows who his mother is, but he doesn't know who his father is. And the child, when he says to his mother, "Is that my father?" she says, "Keep quiet." You know? We don't want to talk about it. So that's another classification. Asufi. Asufi means he was gathered in. You found him on a doorstep. Child was abandoned, and abandoned child. Discuss this a little. So we don't know who the father was. We don't know who the mother was. Now, who normally abandons a child? Usually a child that's born out of wedlock, and the child's not wanted because it's a disgrace to the mother, so she abandoned the child. So there's strong reason to suspect that there's illegitimacy. No. Like we discussed it. Among Jews, there's no such thing. A person abandons a child out of poverty. Kohani, Leviv, Yisraeli, Mutar, Lobo, Zeboseh. These 3 classifications, whether you're a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, they're permitted to intermarry with one another because they're all legitimate Jews. Levi, Yisraeli, Chaloli, Geri, V'charuri. A Levi, a Yisrael, a Cholol, a child that was born from a forbidden marriage between a Kohen, whoever the woman was, or converts, or Haruri, an emancipated slave, which is equivalent of a convert. Mutar Lo Zebazeh. They're all permitted to intermarry. A Levi is permitted to marry anyone who are ordinary Yisrael is permitted to marry. A Levi wants to marry a convert, he can marry a convert, 100% permitted. A person wants to marry a Bas Grusha, the child of a Grusha. So although she's not permitted to Kohen, to a Levi Yisrael she's permitted. Geri v'chaloli, v'charuri. What about a person's a convert, or a charuri means he became a ben chorin, he was emancipated. Mamzeri unesini, a mamzer or a nosin, shtuki v'asufi, which also, it's a question whether they're legitimate or not. Kula mutar lo zebazeh. They're all permitted to intermarry. So a convert is permitted to marry a mamzer. So we had earlier, it was machlokes tanoim. It says, Lo yovo mamzer pekal Hashem. A mamzer is not permitted to marry kal Hashem. Now the question is kal gerim called kal? The community of Gerin, are they classified as kal Hashem? So it's machlokes we had before Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda holds that what? They're called kal. So according to Rabbi Yehuda we had earlier, that's called be'avera. That's kiddushin be'avera. Remember we said, therefore, they're not permitted. But we rule like Rabbi Yossi, that kal gerim is not kal. When it says kal Hashem, only a person who's an original Jew. But a person who's a convert, he's a new Jew, they're permitted to marry mamzerim. They're permitted because it's not kal Hashem. Ve'eleim shtuki. What's a shtuki? Shtuki means, from the word shosek, the person who's silenced. Kol shu makris imo. He knows who his mother is. Ve'ena makris oviv. But he doesn't know who his father is. And whenever he says to his mother, "Who's my father? Is that my father?" the mother says, "Be silent." She silences him. Asufi. What's asufi? Kol shenesat min ashuk. He was brought in from the market. You found him in the market. Ve'ena makir lo soviv lo simo. You're not sure who the parentage of the child. You're not sure who. You know he's a Jew because the majority of the people in the community are Jews. It's a mission in Ksubis, right? It's called Tinok Mushlach. The Gemara says that if you find a child in the street, Tinok Mushlach, thrown in the street, abandoned in the street, what is the community's obligation to the child? So the Gemara says, it's a brisa. So it says, if the majority of the community are Jews, are Jews. You have every level of obligation. Because Rove tells me if the Rove is Jews, so the presumption is you go with the Rove, it's a Jewish child. What about if the Rove are Akum? The majority of the people are Goyim in the community. So Rove dictates that the child's not Jewish. What about it's Mechza Mechza? Exactly 50-50. So it's a Sofik HaShokel. Do you have to return his, let's say that person loses a lost object. Is there an obligation to return a lost object? That's already almost Chavel Overai. It's a monetary issue. But let's say Lachyosa, let's say he's a question of supporting him, where it's a question of life and death. That kind of Mechalon of Shabbos, to violate Shabbos on behalf of him, he Mechal Shabbos. Because it's Sofik the rights of the Chumrah. Because it's a question of he may be a Jew, and for a Jew, one violates the Shabbos. Okay? So that would be the case of what? Of the Asufi. But here we're talking about in terms of legitimacy. Even though the majority community are Jews, but who abandons a child? That's called, it's a raglaim ledover. There's already circumstantial evidence telling us that this conception was a problematic conception. And because it was problematic, that's the reason why the mother abandoned the child.
If they're over Jews, and the community takes care of that child never has to convert.
Correct.
If they're over Akbar, and they take this child in,
Okay?
the child...
It's like, you go to an orphanage, a person adopts a child.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know the parentage of the child. The presumption's a goy. It's not Jewish.
The child has to convert.
That child would have a conversion. Correct. That's the reason why Moshe says, everybody says, that whenever people adopt children, unless you know the parentage of the child, if it's a Jew, you should not adopt that child. If it's a Jew, it's complicated. It's a Jew, because it may be an illegitimate child. You never know who the child is. You don't know the parent. One time documents were sealed. Adoption, everything was sealed. Even the adoptive parent could not find out the pedigree of the child. You can end up, a brother could end up marrying a sister. You have all kinds of issues over here. If it's a non-Jew, you convert the child, so it's a new Jew. That child can't marry a Kohen. But as long as it was a valid conversion and the child accepted and was raised properly, that child can marry any Jew except for a Kohen. But if you deal with a Jew, unless you know the background of the family, see, in Europe it was not uncommon for people to adopt Jewish children. People died during a plague. Child was left over all by himself. So the community assumed responsibility. People adopted the child. Families were killed in pogroms or whatever it was. So family adopted the children. So that's how many adoptions in Europe came about. So you knew the pedigree and the background on the child. So it was never a question.
Who would adopt a Jewish child? If you know the child is Jewish, you don't know. So who
It's not simple. I'm just saying it's much more complicated. Much more complicated. Much more complicated. Abishol hoyakore l'shtuki beduki. Abishol said that where the child doesn't know his mother, knows his mother, doesn't know his father is, he says beduki. That the mother has nemonus, has credibility, that if she says she was impregnated by a kosher Jew, you rely on her testimony. But we'll see. Is it Rov Akum, the majority of non-Jews, Jews? We'll see the Gemara. Okay, so there were 10 classifications of Jews that Ezra had brought from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. It's interesting. The first mission in Brochus says, Me'imosai Koren Kriyishma Barvin. When do you say Kriyishma in the evening? When the Kohanim, they're permitted to eat Truma. Like first Mishnah in Brochus. Steve, remember when you were in camp, you learned Mishnayos. Me'imosai Koren Kriyishma Barvin. When does the Chiv, when do you say Kriyishma in the evening? Mishnichnosin Kohanim lechel b'trumosim. When the Kohanim are permitted me after the Kohen is contaminated, although he goes to the mikveh during the daytime, he has to wait for nightfall before he's able to eat truma. That's called Herav Shemesh. So the more asks a question, what's Rebuta? Rebuta Nasi is coming, is compiling the Mishnah, authoring the Mishnah. Tell him, when do you say Kriyishma in the evening? Should say Seisakochavim. What does he have to speak about? It's like scratching your left hand, your left ear with your right hand. Say, be more direct. So the Gemara says in Brochus and Abayz that whenever Rabbi Yehuda Amnosi has an opportunity, while he's presenting something to educate you with other information, he doesn't pass on that opportunity. Why? Because there's a halacha that a person's mechusa kapara. A person, let's say, he's a leper. A leper, even after he overcomes his leprosy, he goes to the mikveh, until he brings his korban, he's not permitted to eat kosher. A woman who gives birth, although she went to the mikveh, she's already holding at a certain point, until she brings her korban, she's not, which is part of her atonement, she's not permitted to go into the base of mikveh, she's not permitted to kosher. So I would think that what eating truma is similar to kochim, that you have to wait for the 8th day in the daytime, and the eighth evening is not sufficient. I would think the same halacha would be true by truma. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, when he compiles the list, says, when does the Kohen eat the truma? The 8th night. He doesn't have to wait for the 8th morning. At nighttime, he is already permitting the truma. So the Gemara over here also is going to ask, why does he have to tell me where they came from? It says, Ezra, when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he brought with him. It says, when he ascended. So it should say, when Ezra came to Eretz Yisrael, he brought 10 classifications of Jews. You have to tell me from where he came. He came from Bavel. Not only did he come from Bavel, he ascended from Bavel. So evidently, all this other information seems to be totally superfluous. It's not really pertinent information for what the mission is telling us. So the Gemara is going to say, because Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, whenever he presents something, he has an opportunity to elucidate and to educate us and give us information about something which is important, he doesn't miss on that opportunity. That's Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. Asar Yusnal Bibavel Mayiri Detanu Olu Bibavel Nisnu Holchu Eretz Yisrael. What does he use the term? They ascended from Bavel. He should say they went with Ezra to Eretz Yisrael. Milza Agavurchi Kamash. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi is telling me something in passing. While he's informing us regarding these 10 classifications of Jews, he tells me something in passing. Kedetanyo, the Kamta V'Alisa Elamokri. It's very interesting. Gemara says in Sukkah, David remembers because he was here when we went to Sukkah about 15 years ago. The Gemara says in Sukkah, it says, there's a pasuk that says, V'Oleu Lo Yibol. It says the leaf will not wither. What does it mean, Oleo Lo Yibol? So the Gemara says that Sichas Chulin Shel Tamid Chachomim Tzrichen Talmud. That when a Talmud Chacham speaks, even ordinary talk, you're able to learn from his ordinary talk. He tells you an event. He speaks about the weather. He doesn't say nonsense. So whenever he speaks about even mundane topics and issues, there's what to draw from it, how he expresses it, what he points out, what he identifies. So even the leaf, what's the value of the leaf? The leaf has no value unto itself. The leaf is to protect the fruit. Oleh lo yibo. His leaf does not wither. Even the leaf, what seems to be the peripheries of his speech, lo yibo, doesn't wither. It has value. It continuously has value. A leaf after the fruit grows has no value any longer. But the sichas chulin shtamir chom continuously has value. I was reading about Rebbe Yoshev. When he was older, Purim, he would spend Purim with his son-in-law. His son-in-law, his name is Rabbi Zriel Orbach, Shlomo Zalman. This son-in-law never had children. And when he was younger, I mean, he lived till 102. Younger was when he was 85 years old also. He was younger. So when he was younger, so he'd give half the day people would come on Purim, the brachas, gave time to a lot of people. But when he was older, he set aside a half an hour for his family, half an hour for other people. So they asked him why. Why did things change? Why? And we know every moment of his life, he invested fully in his learning. See, I'm just sure this has to do with Oleh Lo Yibo, I'm pointing out. So Rebbe Yoshev said, because he was such a special person, and he wasn't a person who you were able to you couldn't waste his time. If you came to speak to him, you had to speak something very specific, and the moment you finish asking your question, the conversation was over, because he had no time to waste. So you come to him, so he says, when people would come to me, he says, I'd give one person 30 seconds. Another person I gave 45 seconds, or a minute. I have to be concerned that I'm not offending another person. because another person may feel that I'm giving more time to one over the other. You have to be sensitive to people's feelings. So sometimes he go out of his way, although he was wasting his time, not to hurt a person's feelings. Therefore, he says, when I was younger, I was able to do it, to keep in mind exactly how much time I gave each person. He had hundreds of people coming to him, not ordinary people, even Talmidei Chachamim. Now that I'm older, I just don't have the mindset to focus on that. Therefore, if there's a half an hour, everybody has to get into that half an hour. So therefore, but otherwise I had to be very concerned because I didn't want to offend anybody. You understand? The way their sensitivities, there's oleh lo yibo. Even the leaf never withers. Whatever topic they discuss, their actions, their behavior, everything is evaluated. It's with a specific intent. Nothing is just arbitrary. There's nothing arbitrary in their lives. Okay? So the Gemara says, Rav Yudah Nosi Milsa Agavuchi Kamashma. He's telling me something in passing to educate us. Kedetanya, it says in Parsha Shoftim, every community, it says Shoftim B'Shot Titl Chom Chosherecha. Every community has to have a Sanhedrin Ketana. Every community has to have a court comprised of 23 judges. Each one of the Dayonim has to be a Somuch. They have to be ordained with the ordination from Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay? What happens if there's a dispute among the various courts and they're not able to resolve the dispute? So the Torah says, "V'kamtiv liso." You rise and you ascend to Yerushalayim. You go up to Sanhedrin Gedolah, and their decision, that is the final word in Torah. The Torah says, "V'kamta v'olachto." What does Torah use the term "v'kamta v'oliso"? You rise and you ascend. V'kamta v'oliso elamokim sheyivkra Hashem Elokecho. Meaning you go to the Lishkas Agozis. That was the chamber of cut stone. That's where they would convene. From this pasuk, we're able to draw the Beis Hamikdash, Kol Eretz Yisrael. It's the highest location in Eretz Yisrael is the Beis Hamikdash. The Kamta, wherever you are in Eretz Yisrael, it's for Kamta, because every community had a Sanhedrin Ketana, had a court comprised of 23 judges. If you can't resolve the issue, the Kamta v'oliso. So from there we see Beis Hamikdash Gavoa Mikol Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael Gavoa Mikol Arotzos. And Eretz Yisrael is the highest location of all communities in the world. No, we never studied it. It's Gemara Tzvachim. It's Gemara Tzvachim. Gemara says in Tzvachim that, I'm telling you, between the shoulders. Some people get it between the eyes, it's between the shoulders. Okay, so the Gemara says that, Chagi, Zechari, Malachi, they were the last three prophets. And they lived till the beginning, and they passed through right after they built the second Beis Hamikdash. Why did Hashem allow them to live? It was the end of the era of prophecy. Because when you built the Beis Hamikdash, when you put the Mizbeach, the location of many things had to be exactly in its right location. Otherwise, it's not valid. They were able to identify those locations because they were prophets, and they had the Masorah from the first Beis Hamikdash. They lived during the first Beis Hamikdash. They survived the second Beis Hamikdash. So there's a question we speak that says, "Ubein ksef of shochem." It says regarding Binyamin, between the shoulders it will dwell. The location of the Shekhinah. So the question is, where exactly is the Holy of Holies? Where do you place that? So it says, because there's a location Beis Hamikdash is called Ein Itom. There's a spring which comes out of that location, which is a little higher than that. So because it's Bein Kseifa Shochem, you have to go down slightly. That is the location of the Kodesh Kodesh of the Holy of Holies. That's what it means over there. Originally there was a question where to put it, higher or lower. So it says Bein Kseifa Shochem, between the shoulders it will dwell. Therefore it has to be slightly lower. So Chagi and Zachari, they're the ones who interpreted this pasuk in this manner. Okay? No, the Beis Hamikdash, in general. We're not talking about, that's the Kodesh Kodoshim. But the location of the Temple Mount, that is the highest. We're talking about the whole location. We're not talking about one specific location in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay? Beis Hamikdash is Gavoa. First we're talking about the chamber of cut stone. We're talking about where they convened. Welcome to Liso. So when you go from anywhere in Israel to the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to the highest location. And how do we know Eretz Yisrael is Gavor Mikol HaRotzos? So Mos Bishlo Beis HaMikdash Gavor Mikol Eretz Yisrael Hainu D'Chsiv. That's based on the pasuk. It's as it says, there are divrei rivos b'shorecho. If there are disputes in your communities, let's say you have two batei dinim in the same community, and they have a dispute, and you're not able to resolve this dispute, v'kam to v'liso el Eretz Yisrael Gavor Mikol HaRotzos min Olam. That Eretz Yisrael is the highest location of all lands. How do we know this? The Chsiv, it's pasuk Yirmiyahu. L'chein hine yomim boim num Hashem. This pasuk. It's a question. You know, we're talking about Yemos Mashiach. V'lo yomru Chai Hashem Mishelo Es Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. They will no longer say Chai Hashem, who brought the Jews up from Mitzrayim. Kim Chai Hashem Helo Asher Hevi Es Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Sofon. He brought them up, and he brought them from the northern lands. This is from Bavel. Umikol HaRotzos Asher Hidachtem Sham. From all the communities that they were cast off there. One second. Yeah. What did you want to say?